my fingers awkwardly navigating the delicate straps of my summer dress. The late afternoon sun streamed through the blinds, casting golden streaks of light, yet my thoughts wandered far away. I had just finished setting the table for dinner, waiting for Ryan to come inside from the garden where he was fixing the broken tree chore he had taken on without me even asking. As I pulled one strap back over my shoulder while adjusting my bra underneath my fingers, I felt clumsy in most situations, wrestling with a small clasp just as I thought I had it. The clasp securing my other strap came undone. The dress slipped, and for a fleeting moment, I stood frozen in surprise, staring at my reflection as the fabric pulled at my waist, leaving me anything but lace and the glow of the suit. It was in that moment, just as I reached head to pull the dress back up, that I heard a soft knock on the doorframe. "The Irimoff dinner is incredible. Do you require anything?" I pivoted, quickly holding the dress tightly to my body, and there he was, my stepson, silhouetted in theater way. Ryan's gaze lingered for a moment longer than intended before he snapped back to reality, swiftly turning his head. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice strained and rushed as if he had momentarily forgotten how to breathe. "I didn't mean to." "It's fine," came the reply, interrupted him though, the warmth creeping into my cheeks revealed my composed facade. "The door must have been ajar." He nodded, retreating as if the atmosphere around us had become too electric. His gaze flickered up to meet mine for a brief moment before he vanished down the hall. I lingered there, clutching the fabric of my dress and staring at the vacant entrance, my heart raced with a sensation that was at odds strange and known. At 50, I've been a widow for almost 7 years, residing in this vast house that feels overwhelmingly large and eerily silent, with just me in it. My late husband, Daniel, provided me with all the essentials: comfort, security, the kind of life many aspire to, yet he also left behind an unexpected void, one that resonates in every corner and in every ordinary Korean. Then there's Ryan. Daniel's son from his first marriage is now 29, tall, and possesses a quiet confidence that is both endearing and maddening. Since Daniel's passing, Ryan had insisted on staying in my life. "Family doesn't just stop," he had said at the funeral, his hand warm on mine, his grief mirroring my own. "Over the years, he's been my lifeline in ways I didn't expect, coming over to help with the things Daniel would have done, fixing the fence, clearing the gutter, scaring heavy boxes up from the basement." We fell into an easy rhythm, one where his company feels more like a bow for the loneliness I try so hard to hide. But lately, I've noticed something. It's in the way his eyes linger a second too long when I hand him a glass of iced tea, way he stands a little closer than necessary when we're looking over some old family photo albums. I've tried to dismiss it as my imagination chalking it up to the way grief plays tricks on a lonely heart. But after what just happened, after the way his voice hitched and his cheeks fled flushed, I'm not so sure anymore. That night at dinner, the air between us was thick with something unspoken. He sat across from me, his sleeves rolled up, his tan forearms resting casually on the edge of the bowl as he complimented the roast chicken I had made. I smiled, nodding Athos words, but I couldn't focus. All I could think about was the moment in theater way, the way his eyes had widened there. He quickly looked away like he'd seen something you shouldn't have, like he wanted to look longer, but knew heckled. The thing is, I wasn't as angry as I should have been. Shouldn't I felt outraged, embarrassed, something closer to the kind of indignation a woman in my position is supposed to feel, but instead there was only a strange and welcome heat curling in my chest, spreading to places I hadn't thought about in years. As I sipped my wine, I caught him glancing at me, his eyes fell to his plate swiftly. When our gazes met for the first time, I sensed a shift. Wasn't merely me observing him, but them observing me as well. After dinner, he volunteered to wash the dishes. I observed him from the living room, the steady rhythm of water running and plates blinking, lulling me into a trance. His broad shoulders shifted beneath his shirt as he leaned forward over his sink, and for a moment I lost myself. I forgot that I was the woman who raised him, the decades that separated us, and the fact that this was wrong. When he turned off the faucet and glanced over at me, his lips parted, my heart faltered, and I sensed within that this was Mary Luba. Start the following morning, I stood in the kitchen pouring coffee into my favorite ceramic mug when I heard the back door creak open. "Morning," Ryan called out, his voice slightly hoarse, carrying the timbre of someone who hadn't quite shaken off sleep. I glanced over my shoulder, catching sight of him in the doorway, his hair tousled, t-shirt snug against his chest, and a toolbox. "And only him." "Morning," I replied, my voice steady even as my pulse quick. Effort. "I get started on the back fence before it gets too hot," he said, stepping inside, his presence filling the room with a faint scent of earth and pine coffee. I asked, holding up the pot, smiled that lopsided grin that always seemed to disarm me. "Sure, black, please." As he handed him the mug, his fingers brushed against mine for just a second, but it was long enough to send a ripple of foulness through me. I glanced up and for a brief instant our eyes locked. Fatment was ephemeral, yet it hung in the electrified atmosphere, surrounding us. Day unraveled in snippets of circumstances later. As I stood on the porch observing him drive nails into the fence, I couldn't help but analyze him, his spurred shoulders, the flex of his muscles. He toiled, the sheen of sweat glimmering at his temple. I reprimanded us for letting my thoughts drift where they shouldn't, yet it was difficult to overlook the way he carried himself, that quiet confidence radiating from him. At one moment, he glanced back over his shoulder and caught me staring, quickly averted my gaze, pretending to adjust the hem of my sundress. But my heart raced against my ribs. When half finished, I brought out a picture of lemonade. He sat on the porch steps, his shirt damp and clinging to his skin, and I joined him, handing him a glass. Looks like you fixed it, I read, Neil nodding toward the fence. Only because I had such a good excuse to come over, he replied, his tone playful, yet his eyes were searching mine. I laughed softly, but his words lingered, their weight palpable. The unspoken meaning lingered in the atmosphere that night as I lay restless in bed, my thoughts cycling through each encounter from the day. His voice, his smile, the way his eyes lingered felt too vivid, too real to ignore. I tried to convince myself it was harmless, that it was all in my head, but deep down I knew better. A few days later, he stopped by again. I thought I'd take a look at the deck, he said, standing in the doorway with that familiar toolbox in hand. The deck didn't need fixing. I knew it, and I was pretty sure he did too, but I stepped aside, letting him in as he worked. I brought out a tray of iced tea. The summer heat was oppressive, and the cool drink was a welcome reprieve. He thanked me, taking a long sip, then leaned against railing, his gaze drifting toward me. You know, he began, his voice low, I think this is the first summer I've really spent time here with you. I smiled, feeling a warmth bloom in my chest. I'm glad you're here, Rayan. I really am. High size softened, and for a moment it felt like we were the only two people in the world. Over the next few weeks, his visits became more frequent. He found reasons to hobe around, fixing a squeaky door, hanger, placing a light bulb, trimming the hedges in the garden. Each time our conversations grew deeper, more personal. He told me about his childhood, about how he used to resent his father for marrying so quickly after his mother left, but then he smiled, looking at me. It didn't take long for me to realize how lucky he was to have found you. His words caught me off guard for a moment. I didn't know what to say, but then he reached out his hand, brushing mine, and if everything else seemed to melt away on evening. We sat on the porch, swinging a bottle of wine between us. The conversation was light. At first, memorious off Daniel's stories about Rayan's college days, but as the wine flowed, so did the words we'd both been holding back. I never told you this, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, but after Dad passed, I didn't just come around to help you. I came because I needed to be here with you. His confession hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. My breath hitched in for a moment. I couldn't speak. Rainway, I began, but he shook his head, cutting me off. I know it's wrong, he said, high size, searching mine. I know how this looks, but I can't ignore what I feel. The turning point came on. A rainy afternoon. He had come over to bring a new garden hose, but the weather had taken a sudden turn, leaving us stranded indoors. The rain pounded relentlessly against the windows, the gray light casting long shadows across the living room. We sat on the couch, a movie playing softly in the background. I couldn't tell you what it was. We weren't paying attention. I've been thinking, he said, breaking the silence about as my heart skipped a beat. Rayan, we can't, but he reached out, his fingers brushing against mine. What, why not? He asked, his voice steady, his gaze unwavering. We're not hurting anyone. It's just us here in this moment. Why can't we have that? His words sent a shiver down my spine. I wanted to Argado push him away, but the truth was I couldn't, because deep down I wanted it too. Before I could say anything, Helen and his hand cupping my face as she's lips brushed against mine. It was soft at first, tentative, as if he were waiting for me to pull away, but I didn't. Kiss deepened, and for a moment the world fell away. There was no rain, no judgment, no past or future there. Weaselly us when we finally pulled apart. His forehead rested against mine, his breath warm against my skin. I'm sorry, he whispered. I shook my head, my hands trembling as they rested against his chest. Don't be. We sat there for a long time, the rain continuing its relentless song on the world outside. Neither of us spoke, but the silence was filled with an understanding that didn't need words. By time the rain stopped, something between us had shifted. There was no going back now, no